Yo, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to talk about, um, I guess something completely different. I was just talking about faith and logic and rationality and free will. And now I'm going to talk about politics. So I guess pretty much none of those aforementioned things will apply. um, But yeah, so we've been having debate surrounding the constitutionality of deporting people for supporting terrorists, essentially. And I think it's a slippery slope. It's a hard one, right? Because it's like you if you can classify anyone as a terrorist and then you can deport anyone for supporting said terrorist, then I could see that easily being abused. However, when you look at what's currently going on, you have a guy calling for Intifada, and in my opinion, Intifada is inextricably linked to terrorism. Like, people in the West are all making the argument that it doesn't necessarily mean violent uprising, that it's referring to metaphorical uprising, uprising against Western values, a change in the way you believe, the world should work, I guess. Like, that's the argument they're trying to make. That it isn't a call for a violent uprising. And the thing is, Islamic Jihad, while it isn't necessarily a call for a violent uprising either, it is a call to promote what they see as good and right and proper in the world. And so as long as you have lots of people that practice these extreme versions of Islam that tell them that they're justified in murdering people who won't convert, for example, or people who they see as being of lesser value because they're not believers in the true God. For example, in Europe, you have the rape gangs where they say, oh, well, these women, they dress in this way, they don't observe Sharia law, essentially, therefore we can rape them because they have no value. That's like essentially how they think. And I know that sounds brutal, but it's all come out, it's all real, it's all true. And so it's like there is a difference between the application of the word jihad or Intifada in the mind of an Islamist from the Middle East than there is in the mind of like a college student from the West. And so when you consider that, I think you're playing a game, right? You're playing this game of well, let me see how much can I get away with? How far can I push the limit and get these people to accept something? Like, and everyone's done it as a kid, right? When someone doesn't really know what you're talking about, like you've got an inside joke or something's going on and you're all like, you're letting the person say it, and every time they say the thing, they're actually like self-owning or self-dissing or whatever. I kind of think that's what is going on here. It's like you get all these Westerners to call for Intifada, and in their minds it's like this cutesy anti-capitalist thing, but they have no idea that in the Islamist mind, like, the uprising against the West includes sexual liberation, feminism, like all these other things that they believe in. So it's like, it's really interesting to see how they, because of identity politics, are so easily just to say, well, we support Palestine and therefore Hamas because Israel are the real terrorists, and America are the real terrorists. And I mean, I've gone down that line of thinking before. Um, and I'm not saying that I believe that everything that's happened in the Middle East that the West has done is justified. Like, I would say far from it. But again, even more so, like that, the reality of the rebel fighter from Palestine calling for Intifada, like where the whole concept came from. I just don't see that being this abstract metaphorical thing that people are making it in the West. So I actually don't have a problem with people losing their scholarships or getting deported or labeled terrorists when they call for Intifada, because I think there's no other way to get these people to think about the reality of what they're saying. And I guess you really have to get into a long convoluted discussion if you want to start talking about Israel. But the fact of the matter is that Israel is the one that has the upper hand. And when you're not in the place to make demands in a negotiation and you choose to instead commit terrorist acts and then gaslight the rest of the world into joining your side because innocent people are getting killed by Israel, I don't know. I think this is deceptive, coward tactics. Like, and it's funny too, because it's like, it's so easy to say, oh well, Israel's just at fault here, but then you realize, okay, Hamas, the terrorist organization, has been the de facto government of Palestine for like decades now, or at least a decade. Pretty sure it's been over a decade, well over a decade, and they have been given opportunities to do good. Like, they've been given thousands of pounds of concrete. They've been given steel tubing for plumbing. They've been given all kinds of different supplies for infrastructure. And, they use the lumber and the concrete to build tunnels, hundreds of miles of tunnels underneath Israel. They use the pipes to build rockets. And so it's like, the conspiratorial side of me wants to say that Hamas is not even a real group, that they're actually plant. But we have no evidence for that, or I don't have any evidence for that. But I mean, it's like, you find out that, like, there's been all these examples of CIA operatives, being involved in operations where, like, the catalyst for regime change was, them. It was the CIA operation. And so it's like, okay, like, is Mossad running Hamas, because the last thing any rational person would do is make a fucking 8th grade science experiment rocket that doesn't even have a payload out of, some, or has like some small payload that may or may not even go off, like, and send that over and give them an excuse to fucking break down the walls with tanks and murder thousands of people, because it's the absolute last thing you do. So it's like, in my mind, it's like either it's Mossad, or they literally are actually the craziest, dumbest motherfuckers that have ever lived. Because it's like, even if you did have no plans on ever actually having peace, the smart thing to do would not be bite the hand that feeds you, but it would be to truly use deception, hire a secular government, do everything right, give gifts, satiate the Israeli, and then one day when they're eating the sweet fruits that you've delivered, hop on their back and slit their throat. That's the way that you would actually do it. Like, I don't understand why, from a strategic point, that they would even operate the way that they've been operating. It makes no sense. So it's like, yeah, it's either you can go full conspiracy and think that it's black flag operations committed by Israel, or you can say that maybe they are just that dumb and angry and guided by hatred. And the reality is that you do have to make more assumptions to believe that they're being led by undercover Mossad agents than they're just pissed off, angry people that aren't willing to negotiate from a losing position. And that's the thing, is sometimes the best you can do is negotiate from a losing position, and you have to humble yourself. You have to take what you can get, and you have to do the best you can with that and prove yourself day in and day out. I mean, as a recovering drug addict, which is the main point of this channel, that's like what you do. You have to humble yourself and take what you can get and prove yourself day in and day out for years. Like, literally, it might even be a full decade. And the reality is that people still might not trust you when you've gone into their room and stolen money from their wallet before, like, or, worse in a lot of cases. So, why would a country be any different? And when you're not willing to humble yourself and, be the loser, essentially, then you wind up in this position. So it's like, that's where I'm at with it. It's like, regardless of where you're at on a philosophical level, like, if you could go all the way back to the Muslims spreading their caliphates all the way through Christendom to the point of burning the library at Alexandria, and then you could say, well, technically we just aren't done taking our land back. We could make that argument if we really wanted to. And I mean, that's technically the argument that they are making, the right to return. But in that regard, then why is it wrong? Why is it wrong if it actually was them who initially spread their caliphates, just because the conflict took this long to get to where it's at? Now we, from a modern mind, get to decide that all of a sudden something different is going on. And I don't know, it's funny because I have gone into all the conspiracies about the creation of Israel. I learned all about the Balfour and Sykes-Picot and the transfer agreement, and I know that it's a much more sketchy and convoluted story than that. I know that there were Jewish, Christian, and Muslim people living in the Levant before it was settled by Israel, and they were living in relative peace. Not to say that they never had skirmishes, but they were agrarian farming communities, and they essentially had to have working relationships at the very least. And they were making what life they could for themselves in the desert. They weren't a developed nation, like it wasn't, or like not in the sense of the first world as it is these days anyways, but I mean it wasn't it's the desert. Like they're not, it's not a place that there's a lot, it's not an easy place to make a life, and so I don't know what to think. It's like, just because there had been relative peace in that area for so long, people look at it as an invasion of the West, but realistically speaking, are we just ending the caliphates? Like, I don't know. I personally have a lot of empathy for Palestine. And and it's hard for me to know. Like, it's really hard for me to know. And it's mostly because regardless of how many question marks you can put above World War II and the creation of Israel and all these other things, the fact of the matter is that now there are millions of innocent people there, and it's Jews and Christians and Muslims and people of different races. And so it's like we're now in a situation where it's not as easy as just saying like, oh, well, just reverse it. Just make it go away. And that is why, unfortunately, for the Palestinians, it's like if you're going to allow Hamas to continue running the nation and using your infrastructure supplies to build battle plans rather than to take care of the people, then I don't know. It's not that I don't feel sorry for how bad Israel has fucked them up, but it's like at a certain point, it's another, like, what else can you do? What else can you do? And I made the argument for a long time that we in the West should do better, in a sense that we know that they're using them as human shields. And if we know that they're using them as human shields, that we can't just, we're in the unfortunate position of not being able to just drop bombs. Like, I mean, in a hostage situation in America, is there ever a situation where they say, okay, well, even if all the hostages die, it doesn't matter, just kill the terrorists? No, there's not. And we all say in the West, we say, oh, well, they're these vicious terrorists, they're misogynists, they abuse the women and the children, they murder people who do not align with their beliefs, and they do it in these like ruthless and brutal fashions. And yet we look at these innocent men, women, and children who don't necessarily want to believe in the terrorism. They don't have an option. Like, they're not allowed to, they don't have a voice. They can't say we don't believe in this or we don't support them. And anything less than, vehement vocal support of them could be interpreted as not supporting. So it's like, we understand all this, yet we say, oh, well, they're the ones that voted for it. They're the ones that choose to allow it to continue. And so they deserve it, I guess. And for me, I don't think it's as easy as saying that. Like, I kind of think we're like victim blaming in a sense, as much as I hate to say it, but it's like, how can we in one breath call the terrorists these brutal people that are like unyielding and unreasonable, and then look at all these people and say, oh, well, they must have made these decisions like on their own recognizance because this is what they believe in too. And I don't think that's necessarily the truth. I think you would probably find a lot of Palestinians that are like, we just don't want our city to get blown up anymore. We're sick of it. And but we can't do anything about it. Like, if we try to support Israel, the terrorists will kill us. If we support the terrorists, Israel will kill us. So it's like, what the fuck are we supposed to do? I guess we support the terrorists because we have to live with them. We're stuck behind this fucking wall with them. So, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard for me to know, like, who does really support. Again, is it, what is their intent when they support? Are they doing it because they intend to support terrorism, or are they doing it because they think they have no other choice? Like, what does their support actually mean? And I guess that is a situation we'll probably always be stuck with in legal jurisprudence, fucking trying to prove intent, right? Because you can't just infer. But anyways, I guess I don't really have much more else to say about it. I've just been annoyed because people act like it's so simple, right? Like, they say, oh, well, Donald Trump incited on January 6th, and it's like, well, did he though? Like, I mean, fight, fight. Fight like hell is, whether you're saying it at a school pep rally or in a political speech, it's a colloquial metaphor, and we know that it means, in the context of a speech like that, just we need to give it our all. We need to be fully dedicated to this. It doesn't mean to resort to violence. And especially when he follows it up with, we need to, make our voices heard, peacefully and patriotically, then that isn't what he meant when he said that. And they'll say, oh, well, he's, speaking in code, and his supporters knew what he really meant, and we're clever enough. See, we're actually just really clever, and we're not going to let them trick us. Like, we see through their bullshit. Yes, we do. And they're really just assuming intent, which is, you can't do it. Doesn't work. And so the question is, are we assuming intent when we say that Intifada is a call to violence? And because we cannot make our decision based on hearsay, we have to look at the context of the word. And like I said before, the context of the word is inextricable from the terrorist jihad, Islamic terrorist jihad. Like, the need to shake off the West only exists because we're fundamentally, at least with the more extreme versions of Islam that these people practice with Sharia, we're fundamentally incompatible. And so it's not about simply anti-capitalism or the American empire. It really is about complete domination of the Western world and of Western values. And if you think that the people who practice these versions of Islam are amenable towards progressive liberal culture, I think that you should become an influencer, fly over there and prove it to us, because I would love to see what kind of results you get. But anyways, yeah, I think we should be canceling people's scholarships and should be deporting people who are calling for Intifada, because I think it is intellectual dishonesty to try and separate the reality of Intifada that as it exists in the context of violent Islamic jihad and say that it is actually some sort of metaphorical call to resisting the tyranny of the West. Like, well, I don't even know. Whatever. Peace.